What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Spill the Tea. If you're new here, this channel is about real conversations, mental health, lived experiences, and the things we don't usually slow down long enough to talk about. And obviously, by the title, as you can see today, we're talking about why facing your demons isn't what you think it is. There's something that I have realized about myself that didn't make sense to me for a very long time. Is that I can sit with a tremendous amount of pain alone, quietly, without numbing it, and without running from it. And that didn't come from pure strength, came from being forced to. As a child, I wasn't just hurt, I was removed. I was forced out of my home, stripped away from my family, and placed into what people might call, the system, into foster care. I was left alone in darkness, and I didn't have language for it yet. No familiar voices were around me. No safety, no explanation that made sense to a child. Just pure silence. And when you're that young and people who are supposed to be there to protect you, disappear, you don't always get the option to avoid pain. You eventually learn to sit with it, simply because, it's nowhere else really for all that pain to go. And that's why I can also do this now very well. And it's not because I'm immune to pain. It's because I had to learn to survive it, long before I ever had a choice. And here's where it connects to you. Your pain doesn't have to look like mine or someone else's to live in the same place in that body, in your nervous system. Now, whether you've dealt with abandonment, such as myself, any kind of loss, rejection, betrayal, or simply loneliness, that level of pain doesn't compare itself to other people's pains. It just shows up and demands that it be felt. And that's why I have the capacity to sit with other people's pain. I always have. Whether it's a high level of empathy or sympathy that people would say, this was a developed skill that I acquired by myself without recognizing it. And I'm able to sit with people alone and in their pain and their depressed states and any other states, and simply because I recognize where it's coming from. Because I too have been there. I've also, been alone, confused, trying to make sense of, a world that, changed overnight, seemingly. For a long time I thought this meant that something was wrong with me. Maybe I was too intense, maybe I was too serious, or maybe I was just too deep, deeper on an emotional level and on an intellectual level. But, now I understand that it isn't something that I chose. It's something that life trained me to do. Like I said, it was an inherent skill that I acquired. When pain shows up early and no one comes to regulate it for you, you're always given two options in life. Either A, you can let that pain destroy you, or B, you can let it stay long enough to understand it. And so staying wasn't bravery. It was a necessity for me. People love to say things, especially motivational speakers. You'll see, successful, rich celebrities or things like that. And they always use the metaphor, you have to face your demons. That's how they'll word it. But no one ever truly explains what that actually means. And some people may imagine, their demons being monsters, really bad traumatic memories that they may not want to relive, mistakes that they have made in life, trauma that they have gone through, any kind of specific event that has happened in your life that's something external to you. But your demons aren't some metaphorical creatures. They're unmet emotions. They're unprocessed pain. Parts of you that adapted to survive when survival was kind of the only goal. And so facing your demons doesn't mean you have to fight them. It just means you have to turn toward the pain. You keep running from and asking why it's there. And that's what I have realized that most people have a hard time doing. Because, when you sit with a very high level of pain, whether you've caused it or it's been caused to you, and when you sit with that long enough, it stops being chaos and it starts becoming more information. Pain teaches you, regardless whether you want to face it or not, it's going to teach you. And if you choose not to face that level of pain, the same repetitive patterns in life will continuously keep happening. And so most people never let it teach them because they numb it the second that it shows up. Maybe they'll sit there and distract themselves. They start to feel lonely or hurt, and so maybe, they start jumping on their phone and texting, and they want to go hang out with their friends and get away from it. They want to intellectualize the pain, or they want to try to minimize it. They want to try to downplay it. Oh, I know my famous saying, what used to be, it is what it is. They try to minimize that pain. Some people may try to rush for positivity, positive thoughts. They try to fill that silence. And that's not because they're weak. It's just because facing your demons requires something most people avoid. It requires literally just this: sitting still, stillness, silence, but also very, very honest conversations with yourself, and being honest with yourself even in your own downfalls. You have to be willing to have accountability, and a part of that is incredibly terrifying. It scares people. So, instead of facing their demons, people try to stay busy. They stay stimulated, they stay numb. But when you don't have that option, when life kind of forces you to sit with that pain, you start noticing what your demons are actually pointing at. They're pointing at where your boundaries were crossed. Maybe you were giving too much into a relationship, or maybe you were giving too much into a job where you started to abandon yourself. Maybe you stopped caring about what truly matters to you. And truly what it starts to point at is what truly needs to change in life. And that's how your pain starts to turn into clarity. That's how it turns into emotional intelligence instead of reactivity. And then, restraint instead of explosion. It turns into the power to communicate and articulate instead of turning everything into chaos and causing fights. It turns that pain into structure instead of letting everything around you collapse. And this is what I do now. And it takes a very long time, and there are times that I still fail, as you can tell. From two videos ago, I told you about my PTSD and my nervous system wanting to instantly kick in and react all over a lost wallet. And in that moment, I still have to reteach myself, to pause instead of exploding. That I can still feel incredibly deeply emotional, not only for myself, but for other people, and very sympathetic, without losing that sense of control. And one thing that I am very certain in is I can always sit in uncomfortable position very comfortably without trying to numb that pain. And I can make that, important decisions without the need of urgency running the show. Not because I'm special, but because I stopped running from my demons and started listening to what they were trying to tell me. So there's a true truth that I want to be able to leave with you. Your demons aren't there to destroy you at all. They're there to inform you. They're there to help you. They're there to guide you. They're there to keep that momentum forward and you bringing out the best version of yourself. But it only happens if you're willing to let them do that, and if you're willing to sit there and listen to them. And facing your demons doesn't mean living in that pain forever. It just means staying long enough to just ask it one question. And this one question can help reprogram your mind when you start to feel depressed or anxious or scared, lonely, maybe you feel an immense amount of guilt, you know, that one question is, what is this trying to show me? And that one question will change everything in your life. Because once that pain becomes your leading source for information, it loses its power over you. And so then you can start to learn how you respond instead of reacting. You start to choose certain things in your life instead of allowing yourself to spiral. You integrate, you know, the ability of communication, articulation, and such, instead of suppressing these emotions. And that's what true strength actually is. It's not dominance, it's learning how to master yourself. And it's not toughness, and it's not pretending like you're a robot that you don't feel. Strength is the ability to stay present in the moment, even when your nervous system wants to escape. You know, such as mine, you know, a couple days ago, again, when I lost my wallet and my PTSD kicks in and my nervous system wants to respond quicker than sometimes my mind wants to allow it to. And these are teachable things that everyone can obtain and learn. So you don't have to be born into hardship to learn these things, such as I was. But I will say you do have to stop running from feeling discomfort. You start small though. You start to notice little things instead of judging, casting judgment out. You start to teach yourself to learn how to pause in certain moments instead of reacting to things. And in those moments you start asking what the feeling is getting at. What are you trying to teach me? And that's how your capacity is built. That's how demons turn into teachers instead of your monsters that people feel like they have to constantly keep running from. And that's what this channel is about. It's not about fixing people. It's not about preaching. It's not even about pretending life doesn't get hurt or life doesn't have its ups and downs and hurdles, but learning how to walk toward the pain long enough for it to show you who you are and what truly actually matters to you in your life. And if any of this resonated with you, in any part of this, it's not by accident. This channel exists for people who've carried more than what they were taught to hold. People who feel too deeply, think deeply, and are learning how to live without running from themselves. And if you want to try to go deeper into this kind of work, again, my book that I had just wrote called A Child Called Home, which will actually be on the shelves within the next couple of weeks. We're actually finishing up the cover design right now. That link will be in the description below soon. And it tells the story, my life story, behind my own nervous system, you know, and also it dives into the foster care system, you know, the silence, the metaphorical armor that I put on, and how my capacity and everything like that was built. And if this kind of conversation matters to you, please subscribe, like, share, comment. We don't try to chase the trends here. You know, we just build communities based around understanding and honesty. And, you know, every single day we don't avoid the work. We complete the internal part of it so that way you can integrate it into real life. So I do appreciate you. Thank you. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. You guys have a great day. Bye.